Hello, my name is Adriana Cardona.
I'm Alicia Cardona.
And I'm Anita Nasser.
And this is Group 18.
Our presentation is on J.L. Borges' The Garden of Forking Paths. For a brief autobiography, Jorge Luis Borges was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1899. He is described as an idealist writer whose short stories subordinate character, scene, plot, and narration to a central concept, a philosophical premise. He does not rely on the central points of narration to carry out his whole story, but instead he ties the entire story together with one unified concept. Labyrinths are Borges' favorite symbol. He has mastered the art of puzzles and discovery. He leaves the reader perplexed and struggling to find an answer to the concepts that don't exist in our reality. He portrays the universe as a compilation of alternate versions of experience. This means that each choice we make leads us to a different future, but all of the futures exist at the same time in the same plane. He was one of the forerunners for the magical realism movement in Latin America. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines magical realism as a literary genre or style associated especially with Latin America that incorporates fantastic or mythical elements into otherwise realistic fiction.
Brief summary of the work. Dr. Knudsen, a spy for the German Empire, has discovered that his cover has been blown and that a British spy, Captain Richard Madden, is after him, and he begins to panic. Knudsen needed a way to tell his chief that he has discovered the location of the new British artillery park. Knudsen needs to flee before the British spy apprehends him. So he looks in the phone book and sees the name Albert and decides to seek him out. He takes a cab to a train station because he believes it is safer than walking there. And on the train, he sees Captain Madden and gains confidence from the knowledge that Madden didn't see him. Knudsen arrives at Ash Grove, gets off the train, and walks to Albert's house. Knudsen meets Albert and discovers that Albert is an expert on Knudsen's ancestor, Zupen. Albert passionately discusses the ancestors' ideas and motives to Knudsen. They talk about Zupen's work, A Garden of Forking Paths, and what it represents. Knudsen sees Captain Richard Madden approaching Stephen Albert's house. Knudsen, having no other choice, shoots Albert while he has his back turned, and he dies instantly. Knudsen shot him because he needed to indicate that the city of Albert had to be bombed to his chief. Madden bursts in and arrests Knudsen. Themes in the work. Time. The theme of the Garden of Forking Paths is time itself, and is thus not mentioned in the work of Zupen at all. The work embraces all possibilities of time. He didn't believe in absolute time, and instead thinks of time as an infinite series, where each choice opens up a completely different future. Chaos. Navigating the chaotic manuscripts by Sue. It's just like navigating your way through a labyrinth, trying to find a semblance of order but being unable to do so. Time forks perpetually towards innumerable futures. The book was left unfinished, and this represents the endless nature of time and the endless amount of possibilities that accompany each fork in the path. Which perspective are we taking? We will be taking Stephen Albert's perspective and analyzing his thought process as he decodes Zupen's work, A Garden of Forking Paths. Additionally, we will be analyzing how Stephen Albert comes to the conclusion that the work in itself is the labyrinth that Zu alluded to. We will be looking at how Albert must have felt as he worked his way through the chaotic and disorderly piece of literature.
An excerpt from Albert's journal, July of 1916. In my examination of Zupen's work, A Garden of Forking Paths, I have come across many possible explanations for the chaotic events and chaotic nature of the manuscript. I have diligently searched for answers amongst the many questions that have arisen. I believe it to be in my best interest to document my findings so that another may understand the world as I now do. The answer came to me as I examined a letter written by Tzu Pen. He wrote, I leave to the various futures, not to all, my gardens of forking paths. It was this moment when I realized that Tzu Pen meant for the book itself to be the labyrinth he spoke of. Many people think that the idea of the labyrinth is a literal one, just as they believe that time is absolute and concrete. If they opened their minds, they would see that there are multiple dimensions that can exist at once, all depending on the path they choose to follow. Tzu Pen could have told people that he was going to write a book in one instance and that he was going to construct a labyrinth in another instance. However, nobody would have deigned to realize that these were one and the same thing. The labyrinth he speaks of is an invisible labyrinth of time where each decision creates a new path that you cannot see. You cannot see it because you have chosen one path and you exist only in that one path. Choosing to take another path would have created a different future. You cannot see this future, however, that does not mean that it does not exist. There are an infinite amount of paths that you can take and decisions that you can make. Time forks perpetually towards innumerable futures, and they all exist at once. There can be two different groups whose paths converge to one location and experience different consequences. I could take the same path towards one house. In one instance, I could be an enemy approaching the house. In another instance, I could be a friend that is approaching the house. I could meet a person who becomes my best friend in one instance, or I could meet that same person and they could become my worst enemy. Let's hope that isn't the case. Until next time, Stephen Albert.
Final thoughts. Meaning of the title, A Garden of Forking Paths. He seems to be referring to a hedge maze or labyrinth where people have to choose between different paths to find their way out without knowing what the outcome will be. If you choose to go right, you can have also chosen to go left. It leads to the countless decisions that one person makes in life and the different outcomes that each decision has. People often feel lost in their life with the countless amount of choices. And that's the end of our presentation.
Thank you for watching.
And goodbye.